started.
So he's okay then.
We're going to go ahead and get started for the sake of time. Rhonda is here. Hold on. Ooh.
Just to hear my stories about pirate ships
Yeah, right. And loincloths.
in loincloths.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rhonda is here, and she's been working on her master's program, and this is part of her finishing that up. She's been doing surveys, working specifically with churches and those people that leave churches. Why are they leaving? In Southern Baptist Convention, we have a huge exodus of people that are leaving the churches right now. And being a Southern Baptist, that's why her focus is on that. So she's going to be presenting her research to you tonight. She's going to be kind of in control because this is recorded and it's for her class, under my understanding, right, Rhonda?
Yes.
And so we are her audience. So we're here as an audience to support her. And this is part of her class. She gets a grade on this. And I think we'll get something as well out of it also. So
what is the cue for us to clap? We might have
Wow, I
what,
didn't
you?
expect clapping.
Got troublemaker
That's
there.
awesome. If you don't mind, I'd like to start with prayer,
Yeah.
just to get myself focused here. Father, thank you so much for giving us the chance to meet tonight. I pray that you'll fill me with your spirit, give me your words to say, and that your will be done, that the people will hear what you want them to hear, and that everything that's said and done tonight will glorify you. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. First of all, I dressed common. I apologize to my graduate professors. We're supposed to dress up for professional projects, but I knew you wouldn't be, and I know it would make me look weird. So I just decided to be normal, and here I am. But thank you very much, Pastor Curtis, especially for asking me to do this. I've been working on this for about 4 years. So this is kind of a big deal to me. My heart has always been in building the body. So what we're going to talk about tonight is what I've been learning, what we've done at church here, some of the problems that I've encountered, and what we can do as Christians to make a difference to help people stop the exodus and return. Okay, so first of all, I want us to talk about words, and I have some interactive things I want us to do tonight, but I want us to think for a minute about words. What? No interaction?
I told Debbie, I said, you don't have to worry, you don't have to interact.
You don't have to do anything, I just have things to give you. Now, I'm not going to call on anybody, but I do want to tell you at the end, if you have questions, feel free. If you think about your questions, you want to ask questions, feel free. If you want to interrupt me and ask questions, feel free. It's fine. This is a very informal situation. I want us to think about words for a minute. Words have power. Our words all have power. God used words to create the world. He used words to communicate with us in His Word. He gave us communication to communicate with each other. And we are given that gift for good purposes, but we need to understand that He's going to hold us accountable for those words, right? Every idle word, I think, is what Scripture says about that. Words are valuable. Now, the negative downside of that is that our enemy knows that as well. And he's going to do everything he can to make sure that our words destroy instead of build. One of the things that I've noticed just almost right off the bat, it didn't really surprise me. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. I've been in it all my life. Is that as far as communication goes, we sort of have an educational gap there. We do it the way we do it, and that's how we learned it, and that's how we practice it, and we really don't know if we want to change that. We just want things to work. We don't really want to have to change ourselves to make that work. But when I started school, and at the age of 53, that was a little scary. When I started school, God started working on me. And the reason that I took an 18 credit hour certificate in conflict and dispute resolution was because I was so lousy at it. I needed to know how to do it better. I wasn't raised to do it well. Anybody here raised to do it well? Never mind, I'm not. Okay. Okay, so we're supposed to learn how to communicate. We're supposed to learn how to use the words God's given us. And we're supposed to seek knowledge for several purposes. We're supposed to build up believers. We're supposed to build up each other. We need those words to share the gospel. We need those words to maintain unity in the body. What happens when we don't communicate well? It's ugly. It's very ugly. And in a way, I realize that we can't lose our salvation, and I'm not suggesting that in any form, but in a way, God's people are perishing for lack of knowledge. Not our salvation, but our relationships, our ministries, our marriages. Lots of things are not working like they should work, including the body of Christ, because we don't have the unity we should have, because we don't communicate well with each other. It's been my experience that conflict, unresolved conflict, is the norm in our churches. When something works well, it almost feels like it's by accident, because we just don't know. I did not know how to do this well. What got me started on this was I was looking at the North American Mission Board website, and they had a pie chart. And the pie chart said that only 10 to 12% of our Southern Baptist churches are considered healthy and growing. That's sad. 70% in the middle, I think it was 72%, are plateaued. They're treading water. They're not growing, they're not losing people, they're just feeding the rat race. Here we go. Where's the treadmill for the little mouse? That's what they're doing. And the bottom 10 to 15% are in crisis. They're either in danger of splitting, which is the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing, having unity, or they're in danger of closing, and lots of churches are closing. We've seen it here, over and over and over. Last semester, I developed, as one piece of my research, a community survey. Some of you mentioned that you'd seen it in the paper, the little thing, I don't know. It made me feel uncomfortable putting it out there, but that was the only way I could think of to get it out there for people. I put it on Facebook, and I put it in 3 newspapers. And I got a fairly decent response, not what I wanted, but I did get a good response. What I found really surprised me. Only half, a little over half, of the people that replied to my survey said they had ever read the whole Bible. And we're Christians who say we believe the Bible and we live our lives according to the Bible, but yet we haven't read the whole thing? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's the truth. A lot of our people in our churches that claim to be Christians have never even read, much less studied, the whole Bible. I should back up and say this survey was for people who have left a church because of conflict and either gone to another church or completely stopped going to church because of a conflict at the church. 90%, forgive me, Pastor Curtis, 90% of the people said their conflict was with someone in leadership. Over half it was the senior pastor. So it's very important, and I have so appreciated Pastor Curtis all these months that we've talked about this. He's been so open to understanding and learning about conflict, because as a leader, our pastors have to know how to handle conflict. They set the example. 30% said the conflict was between other people. It wasn't even a conflict they were directly involved in. It was 2 other groups over here fussing, and they just couldn't handle it, so they left. So conflict doesn't just affect the people that are directly involved, it affects everybody. Half of them tried to work it out by talking to the other person that they were in conflict with, and this really surprised me. None of them came away feeling like trying to talk it out with the other person accomplished even somewhat a satisfactory result. None. 80% said that it made it worse. That's sad. That some people are even trying to work it out and they can't. Over 2/3 of the people who left a church because of conflict did find and attend another church. I wonder if they would have stayed in their original church if they had known how to resolve conflict. 1/3, this is sobering, 1/3 still don't go to church anywhere. These are Christian people who say, yes, I believe in Jesus, I'm a saved person, and I'm telling you, I'm not going back into that rat race because it's a mess. People are rejecting what we have, not because they don't believe the message, but because they don't like the way we're doing it. Because a lot of it's just pettiness, conflict. Okay, conflict is everywhere, and I want to see if that's true. Would you raise your hand if you've never had a conflict in your family?
Oh, sure.
She said never.
Never?
Had.
Oh,
You've
never.
never? How about your job?
See, my hearing aids work.
Hey, they do. I love you. I love you. You're awesome. How about work? How about conflict within yourself? Okay, I want you to think of your favorite Bible story. Any Bible stories with no conflict? None?
Fixing a conflict.
They fix conflicts, but everything in life has conflict. We are not ever going to get away from having to deal with conflict. So we will either learn how to do it well, or,
Stay home.
yeah, and the results are just not pretty. Let's see, I brought a sheet here that I wanted to give you. And this is just a food for thought thing. Can we just take those and pass them down this way and that way? And you can keep those. This is one of the things I gave out in my class at the very beginning. And the class, I should explain when I say the class, Pastor Curtis and I had talked about doing conflict resolution here at church, and we ended up doing a Sunday school class. It was 6 months of learning about scriptural communication and scriptural conflict resolution. The results were, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. The ladies are still telling me stories about it. All right, Jesus did not eliminate conflict. We are to be united in spite of conflict. Unity is a worthy goal. It's something we can do. It's a powerful testimony. You know, the world will know that we're Christians by the love we have for each other. And love is expressed in what we say and how we relate to each other, right? So it's a testimony to the world when we can have unity and be unified with each other. It's also a sign of maturity. I remember Billy Graham recently, died. Everybody's thinking about Billy Graham. Bless his heart, what a godly man. And I remember him saying one time that he thought that half of the people in our churches were not Christians. They were not really saved. I don't know how he knew that, and that's not really my point. My point is that we have, especially as Southern Baptists, focused very much on evangelism, which is good. But I think we need to focus more on discipleship and development and maturity of believers. Oh, here, I've got that. Thank you.
Lay them down there.
Yeah. Because if we have churches full of babies, then they're drinking milk. And babies don't behave very well. Babies cause lots of problems with unity in the body. Okay, so that's your one little handout I wanted to give you. Let's see. Okay. Talking about people who have left churches, I want you to think personally, and I don't want you to mention any names, I just want you to think about it. How many people do you know that are Christians that don't go to church? How many people do you know that are Christians that left church, stopped going to church, maybe went to another church or whatever, because of conflict? And what would happen if we could learn how to deal with conflict better so that we could build bridges for these sheep to come back? I mean, we've got hard feelings because we've got people that can't talk to each other. Well, sometimes they're not going to listen, and you can't make people do what they don't want to do. But if we could learn how to do it better, some of them might come back. Maybe even just the positive side of that would be to keep others from leaving. Have you ever thought of leaving because of a conflict? I have. Curtis has. Our great leader. Hey, I appreciate your honesty.
He did, that's why he's down here.
No, there was no conflict there.
You know, I love
all
sharing
good.
Christ with people. I do. I've just never, I'm an extrovert, obviously, duh. But I've never had trouble sharing Christ with people. It's just the most natural thing in the world for me because he's the most meaningful person to me. I mean, he's the only person that's never let me down. He's always there. He's always been there, regardless of how crazy life got, he was there. But my heart has always been in building the body. I love to teach. I want people to know what they don't know so that they can build past their problems. Sometimes I think we create our own problems because we don't know what we don't know.
That's right.
It's true, it's true. One of the examples that one of my professors gave me was a theory called systems theory. And this is really simple, but it stuck with me. I think it'll stick with you. We sometimes think that it really doesn't matter that much what we do, but systems theory is just basically every group is a system. A church is a system. A family is a system. A work office is a system. And everything in that system affects everything else. Think of a crib mobile, you know, the little dangly things that hang down over the baby crib. What happens when you touch one of them?
They all move.
They all move. And when we as believers do or say things in an ungodly way, it affects everybody that sees us. Everybody. My pastor back home used to say, you want to see if people are watching your life, just go out on the square and do something ridiculous and we'll see how quickly it goes across town. You know? We matter. The words we say matter. And knowing how to deal with that all matters. Our study for our class was Romans 12, and God gave me this Bible study. My favorite verse in the Bible for years and years and years has been Romans 12:21. Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by doing good. I think if we could focus on that, harness that, oh my goodness, the difference it would make. Okay, so Romans 12, I mean, most of you can probably quote big chunks of it, you know, especially Romans 12, 1 and 2, right? I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Okay, we know what the verses say, but I think we missed a great big part of those verses. There are about 7 or 8 times in there that it's saying, you do it. It's not a litmus test for somebody else. It's looking at us saying, you do this. So our study, the study on Romans 12, was very focused on what we can do with ourselves. It's a distraction, and please hear me, it is a distraction of the enemy for us to be focused on what everybody else is doing wrong. We're not going to change anybody doing that. Now, being accountable, you know, if somebody's in gross moral sin, as a believer, part of loving them is going to them. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying we can't change anybody but us. So Romans 12 hits that nail on the head and says, you do this. You do this. We divided it into several sections. And I want to give you, where'd it go? Here it is. This is the list of the classes that I developed for this class. You can each have one of those. I think I've got enough there. And it's divided into sections. The first section is about knowing yourself. The second section is about communication and conflict. Then tools for change, conflict and context, and implementing changes. And I'm not going to cover all of these because, you know, this was a 6-month class and we don't have time for that. But if you look over the list, and there's one in particular that you're interested in, I brought my lesson plans. I'm not kidding. My favorite day is, oh my goodness, sitting at a table with all my books open. Ask my husband. I love to read, I love to study, I want to dig, I want to know what it really says, not just the shallow meaning. This was an incredible study for me. We divided it into Romans 12, 1 and 2, where we focused on you, us, individually. Then we looked at verses 3, bless you, verses 3 through 5, which talk about differences in people. You know, the spiritual gifts. Some are given these gifts, some are giving those gifts. When you think of the word diversity, is that a positive or a negative to you?
Positive.
Positive? It should be a positive. It should absolutely be a positive.
No one else said negative.
I know, I know. Isn't that fun? But in the church, we say, we think, we understand that we all have different gifts and that we all have different ministries and all of that, but yet we kind of expect everybody to fit in our little box. Here's the box, you're over there. Here's the box. We do it like this, and you need to do it like this. And if I care about it, you should care about it. Too familiar? Okay, check it, okay. So we talked about diversity, and we talked about different personalities, which a lot of them had studied personalities already, but we looked at conflict styles. How many of you have studied your conflict style? No, you have? Okay. Okay, that was a real heads up for me. Some people are avoiders. A lot of people are avoiders, for a lot of different reasons. Some people are dominating competitors. They gotta run things. It's gonna be their way or the highway, and they don't care what you think about it. Some people just want to make everybody happy. I wanna accommodate. What do you need? I'll do it however you want me to. Just tell me, I'll do whatever you want, okay? I'm a collaborator. I learned that the hard way. I had a mother who was a peace at any price person, and I had a father who would run over you. It was just, it was his way, you know? He was a teddy bear on the inside. I just didn't know that for years and years and years. But all of these personalities, all of these conflict styles, all of these differences are needed in the body. We need them. Now what happens if you have a dominant personality who's not really making use of their gift in a productive way? Anybody know? They are a problem. They are a thorn in the neck and the side. They're just, oh, they're a pain. They're meant to be used for good purposes. They have a job to do. They're a Peter. Remember Peter? I'm never going to deny you, Lord. Cockroaches in the background. Hello. Hey, Kim. So we talked about diversity and we talked about differences. One of the things I heard from the ladies repeatedly was, once I understood this other person that I'm having this conflict with, then I understood that, here's one for her, two for her. There you go. Once the ladies would say, once I understood that this other person is like this, and they're seeing life like this, and they deal with life like this, then it didn't hurt so much. It didn't make me so angry. It didn't create a conflict right off the bat. I could stop and step back and say, oh, that's the way they are. Okay. And then you can deal with it a little better, right? So we looked at differences. Then we looked at, we put 9 through 21 all together. And that's really just the checklist. This is how you do it. This is how you love people. This is how we're patient with people. This is how we treat outsiders. This is our, well, we had several checklists. We did, anybody seen this book? Bible Timeline? Rose Book of Bible Timelines, Charts, Maps.
Not that one, but others.
Oh, it's awesome. One of the things that we did was this, and it gives permission to copy these. So it's 1 Corinthians 13, which when we're talking about love, you know, there are all the things in the verses and the checklist and the verses outside of 1 Corinthians 13 that support it. And we did some self-analysis. We really looked at ourselves. Then,
Chapter 13 literally being for the church, not for marriages.
right.
Yeah.
Love is, as DC Talk used to say, love is a verb. It's what we do with each other. Yeah. And then there's the one on the fruit of the Spirit, and we did that too. We checklisted ourselves to find out if we were being what we should be as the church. Let's see. We talked about, the Harvard Negotiation Project there in part 2, Understanding Difficult Conversations. That was not a Christian book. I adapted all the information to be what we needed it to be for our class, but it was great stuff. It's when you talk to somebody and you hurt their feelings and they react badly with you. Why did they react badly? Well, what did how did they see that situation? How did that make them feel? And what did that mean to their identity? You know, it's being able to look at how the other person sees the conflict. Let's see. Get back on my notes here. I have a tendency to chase rabbits. I know you're shocked at that, but what can I say? Okay. Oh, okay. One of the other things that I wanted to explain to you, that I would really love it if our churches could understand, our members could understand, is that there's a difference between interest and positions. Has anybody ever heard of that before? Interest versus positions? When we disagree with someone, we're like this. We take positions. I'm over here, and you're over here. And never the twain shall meet unless you agree with me. What we need to learn to do is develop common interests. We don't have to agree about everything to make progress in some things, right? If we took a really serious look at everything you believe as an individual, chances are you wouldn't find a whole lot of people that agree with you about everything. We are allowed to disagree. Very educated, intelligent people disagree about the Word. That's okay. God will explain it to us when we get home. In the meantime, what are we supposed to do? Be unified. Unity is not uniformity. Unity means we're on the same page doing the same work, but it doesn't mean we have to do it the same way. Right? I think if we could, as a church, as a denomination, as believers, forget the denomination. I think if we could learn to see each other as brothers and sisters in Christ instead of somebody that disagrees with me, we could work together better. And we would give a better testimony to the world of what godly unity is. And then in the process, we'll learn about each other more, because when you're doing positions, you're closed. You're not really looking at what that other person thinks and feels too much. You're really focused on yourself. This is what I think and what I feel. But when you're doing interest, moving together, side by side, you can learn from each other. And who knows, you might learn something that you didn't know before that changes the way you think or changes what you believe. That's okay. We're all learning, we're all growing, we're all figuring this out as we go along. Lastly, I wanted to share with you some of the things that the ladies said. And I'm not mentioning any names, I'm not giving away any secrets, as Pastor Curtis said at the beginning. That would be very inappropriate. But one of them shared a story with me, said, you know, I get into these arguments with my husband, and it's like a splinter that ends up having to have your arm amputated. It's just no big deal. But because I'm automatically reacting to the tone of voice or the nonverbals, then I overreact to everything. And we have all this big problem when we didn't have to have a problem at all. If we could have just been calm enough to focus on handling it in a godly way. And how does that happen? By each of us handling ourselves in a godly way. Several of the ladies told me that they thought everybody should take this class. I thought that would be encouraging to you. They said, children, there needs to be something like this for children to teach them while they're young. There needs to be adult groups. There needs to be all kinds of people learning how to do this because it made such a difference for them. And I did have a couple of ladies who already knew themselves really well, who were very mature in the Lord. They've been doing this a long time. They're very well read, and they just said, you know, it wasn't that I didn't know this information, but it was good to clean house once in a while. You know, it's good to really look at yourself. We're supposed to judge ourselves so that we don't need to be judged, right? So the other thing that one of the ladies said that I was really impressed with was she said, you know, he has a dominating personality. And she said, my go-to thing is to yell. You know, as soon as it's something I don't want to hear, I'm yelling. And she said, I stopped that. I've started thinking about my actions before I speak. I've been more careful with my words because now I understand how important and how accountable I am for those words. I thought that was priceless. That it made a difference. Hey, Jeannie. So anyway, now I'd like to have just a few minutes for questions. If any of you have questions, I did almost all the talking and you've had to sit still for a long time. So, does anybody have any questions? And anything is fair game, I don't care.
Could you just repeat what you said? I don't think I got it.
I don't think they want me to. So, yeah.
You're creating conflict in here with just so you know. The percentages, I was curious, you kind of went through the percentages, but 10% of the churches or Baptist churches are doing well. But
10 to
meaning
12%.
90, but 90% are,
Right.
Now, how many are static and how many are
It
on
was
the
about
decline?
72%, I believe, when I looked at it. And that was about a year and a half ago,
Okay.
when I saw that on the NAM website.
Okay,
But 70% were plateaued. I just did I rounded them.
okay,
And 10% were good.
okay. So
Yeah,
then we got
growing.
20% that are, and this is like their church population, the attendance every Sunday, you
Yeah,
think?
it was a variety of factors that they used. I called them and actually spoke with the researchers. It was really interesting. But they said that there were certain health indicators that they used. It wasn't just numbers of growth, but ministry, how many ministries those people had been involved in, that type of thing. A lot of it was just the numbers, though, not adding new members.
600 to 900 churches die a year is the statistic they're giving now.
Yeah.
Southern Baptist churches dying a year.
Well, look at the foreign missions and the home missions. They're bringing people home. They're, not as much money. People, can I just be really blunt about this? I mean, that's my personality, sorry. The world is looking at us. I've been at a secular school for 6 years now. And I'm telling you, the world is looking at us saying, why does that matter? That's my point. We need to dig on our own.
We're focused too much on behavior modification.
We are. We're so focused on changing everybody else instead of being what we should be. And that's what that class was for. It was 6 months of take a look at you. Where are you? Who are you? What do you know? What are you doing? Are you helping? Are you hurting? Are you growing? Are you stagnant? Why? We want to make a difference, but, I think there are a lot of people, yes, let me say this one thing. I think there are a lot of people out there that want to know what we know, and it's not a competition. But we've got to know what to tell them. Do we know what to tell them? So, Curtis, sorry.
That's right. I was out taking care of young ones.
Okay.
When you were talking about taking a position versus interest, does the research show anything difference in age and how that is played out generationally? A difference versus of positions? Being a millennial, I feel like millennials and down are better at taking interest, maybe because we don't like taking sides. Whereas my parents and older are very position-minded. They know what they believe, and everyone else should believe what they believe,
The way they believe it.
the way they believe it.
Yeah.
So is there any research that shows that difference in there?
There is quite a bit. I haven't really focused on that, I'll be honest. I don't know a lot about the differences there. I've found generally that people come across very opinionated, but they don't necessarily, it's not that they don't want to hear what you have to say. It's almost like the child kicking in the floor saying, who's stronger than I am? Can you really back it up? Because this is what I think, and I'm a little insecure about it, so I'm going to come across real strong.
Okay.
David, what were you going to say?
Well, part of that, though, is probably done more by age, not by generations. Because the older you, the longer you've lived, the more things that you've seen, and the more those experiences influence what you do and why you do it. And so much of that is dependent upon age. Because many of us, when we were 18, had a different outlook than we do when we're 50.
So why do we go to positional, as you age, why do you go towards positional versus interest?
Because you've not been trained to think outside of what you already see. Think of a big cheesecake. I use this in the class. Think of a great big cheesecake, and it's taller than you are. And you're standing on this side of the cheesecake, and here's your slice. That's all you know. Well, there's somebody standing on the other side of that cheesecake that sees a different piece. But you don't really see that piece. So you're assuming that their piece is like your piece. A lot of assumptions going on in the body.
Because one of my favorite things to do as a pastor is counsel. You
Yeah.
know, and one of my gifts is the ability to counsel and to not choose a side, you know, to hear interest in both sides and to take interest, to find something positive on both of those sides, you know.
Most people can't do
My
that.
counselor, my mentor was really big on making sure that you know, when you go into a counseling situation, that both sides are the same. They have positive, and you have
Right.
to find that positive in it. Whereas if you begin to take a position, you automatically gang up on the other party.
You close that door.
And I feel like that's what we do a lot, is that position. This is it, you know, the whole thing of this is it. This is what I'm, you know. And if it's a biblical standard, you know, those are things to stand on, you know.
They are, go ahead, dude.
If I could, part of
Sure.
what I see though, with much of that, is that you are learning how to deal with issues fairly quickly. And so you become more rigid, I think, as you age, partly because you have already seen some of those issues. You know what the answers are, especially if you're dealing with children. As you deal with your children growing up, you change some of the ways you go about it. One of the things for me was I had told myself when I was growing up that I would never say, "because I said so." Some of you all said that too. But what you do is at some point in time when you're dealing with your children, you come back to that point where they say, "Why?" And after you've answered that question 3 times, you say, "Okay, because I said so." And so what you do is you have a tendency
Right.
as you get older to say, "All right, the answer is this. I don't need to go through all the whys. This is the answer. And that's where I'm going to be."
Right.
And it is sometimes difficult then to back out and say, "Oh, let's have an exchange," because we've gotten used to how we have dealt with
Right.
those situations. And so you do have to kind of reflect back and say, "Okay, what's my situation now? Where am I in the process?" All right, and so we do revert to those. If we're pressed on time, you'll find yourself being much shorter and maybe not listening as much as you would have if you have more time. So part of that is the pressure of time, and as we age, I think we sometimes feel that pressure a little bit more.
You hit the nail on the head right there about the listening, and that's one of the things we covered in the class. I took a class on effective listening, and it was one of the things that made a big impact on me in changing my major from psychology to interpersonal communication. We don't listen well. One of the things we did in the class was take a listening assessment. We think we listen well, maybe, but most of us don't listen well. And regardless of our age, just in case you've misunderstood the other person, which is so easy to do, we have to develop, if we want to be effective, we have to develop a habit of listening well. That means it's not primarily about me. It's primarily about hearing you. How did that make you feel? What did you see?
True.
Yeah.
A lot of people listen to respond, not actually listen to
Right.
listen
Yes.
to what is happening.
Yes.
They're already
They're
thinking about what they're going to
already-
say before
right.
you finish what you're saying.
Right.
Yes.
And how do we fix that?
Yeah.
Some people are not teachable, so what do? We overcome evil with good. We make sure that we're not one of those people. You're not going to change a lot of people, you know, unless they want to learn and want to grow and want to change. But when we change, I had a counselor tell me one time, when you change the dance changes. And that's true. When you're in a conflict situation or in a marriage situation or whatever it is, and you're having a conversation and you go through those same voice inflections, the same stance, the same look, the same they know what's coming. It's not a surprise. And what happens? They turn you off. But if we change the way we react and actually want to understand what they're feeling and what they're thinking and how they're seeing the situation, then we've given them an opportunity to be heard, and everybody needs an opportunity to be heard. You can't say you disagree with someone and be fair about it until you've really listened to them, right? So that's one thing that we covered in the class that I just really wish we could beat the drum for a while, because we've got to learn to listen to each other a little better. These are great questions. Anybody else? You guys are too easy. I was expecting grilled, you know? I think I know what I'm talking about. Wait, let me see.
Whenever they responded about the 90% because of the senior pastor, did you ask for a reason why? Or was it just why you
No,
left?
I didn't. And the 90% was leadership. 40
Leadership, okay.
47, it was either 47 or 52% were senior pastor.
Okay.
I did differentiate between, in the survey, between senior pastor, associate pastor, elders, deacons, committee head, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was, and this was interesting, I didn't put it in here, but almost all, 89% of the conflicts with the senior pastor were, the pastor was older than the person talking. So there was and that goes back to what we were talking about before. Sometimes when you get to where you think you know what you think. I know what I think. I have my opinions. I spent my whole life getting here. You know, I'm 60. Hello, don't challenge me. Well, that's not helpful. It may be true, it may be rational, but it's not helpful if you're wanting to bridge two people. You know, you've got to be willing to hear what the other person has to say in case you've misunderstood them. It's called negative mind reading. We automatically go to the worst case scenario. One of the ladies in the class, one of the things one of the ladies said was, you know, I was so insecure, I was so easily offended. People would look at me and I'd think, I know what they meant, they're looking at me. We do that all the time. But that's not necessarily accurate. They could have gas, you know? I mean, it could be anything. You know, maybe their child tore up their favorite something before they left the house. Who knows?
I don't know.
Go ahead.
I don't know if it's my experience or if anybody else. As I've gotten older, things don't get to me. I let stuff roll off like water off a duck's back more now than I ever did when I was younger,
Really?
especially in arguments at home.
I wouldn't say that's the norm.
It may not be the norm, but that, to me, I've gotten to the point, it's just not, so much of that stuff, it's just not worth arguing over.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that's because you give up. Sometimes it's because you put it in perspective. That's a sign of maturity, you know?
About time. My age.
You finally matured.
I tell you, personally, that's been one of my biggest struggles because I'm so passionate about everything. It's like everything matters. So if I let something go, because I adopted that very Baptist philosophy of if I do this wrong, I'm accountable for whatever happens as the result, right? Well, that's sort of true, and sometimes that's not true. We try to take on too much. We try to think we can fix the whole world, and we can't. We can just fix whatever part God gave us to do. Curtis, did you have any more questions? You're still writing.
I'm a note taker.
You're not telling that back.
I like notes too.
Yeah. Let me,
On the talking that didn't accomplish anything,
yes?
do you have anything that you can expound on that? You said talking between the parties, 80% said talking made it worse.
Oh, yes. The reason I asked
And that
that
was
question.
talking between the two parties, correct?
Right. The reason I ask that question is because a lot of times people say, well, if you'll just go talk to them about it, it'll all work out. But here's the problem. They still think what they think and you still think what you think. And neither one of you probably know how to help yourselves or the other person see past what they think. So you're still going to be stuck in that same, hole.
Still stuck in
Right.
that position.
Yes. So the reason I asked the question is because I actually am a certified mediator now. Well, it's not called a certification in Missouri, but you have to go through this training. And I've had all the classes and all the stuff that goes with that. And I love mediation because it's about a process. It's about offering people a different process. Where they're stuck in their ruts, you can say, okay, we're going to do it like this. You've tried it your way all this time. Now we're going to do this. I want to hear what you have to say. Tell them your story. They get to be heard. uninterrupted. How many times do we do that? Listen to somebody uninterrupted. Then we've got the other person. They get to tell their story, they get to be heard uninterrupted. Then we find those interests. So the 80%, the reason that I asked that question was because, and I didn't bring it up, but I followed that with questions about mediation. Have you been to Christian mediation? Only a few had, but everybody that had, it was at least somewhat positive. There were no negatives listed. And for the people that hadn't ever been through a Christian mediation, I can't remember the number, I didn't hold on to that one. It was over half, I want to say it was 75%, said that they were interested in, like that maybe they would consider a mediation, and a chunk of them were, yes, I would do that. Because people know that they don't know enough to do it well, or they wouldn't have the problems that they have. And sometimes you can bring somebody else in that's a third party to listen and help everybody figure out the what's and who's and how's and all that. It can be a really successful process. Make big changes, I think. Yes? No?
I have questions for you.
Okay, okay. I am very glad, I'm so thankful we got to do that class. I'll end with this. When I asked them if there was anything they would change about the class, the responses that I got were that they wish they had more time. An hour wasn't enough. That they wished it'd be an hour and a half or 2 hours so we could slow it down, have more time to talk about what we'd absorbed and all of that. And then I thought personally 6 months was too much. It's never going to be enough. We hit the tip of the iceberg. It's never going to be enough time to get it all in. But the whole idea is just to give people an interest, to show them enough so that they get hungry to learn more. Once you get started, you know, it's like the teach a fish and give them a fish, you know, once you show them how to do it, they can start digging and look at themselves differently and start making progress and growing. So, any other questions? You guys have been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.